So the small town I lived in was around 45 minutes from Brno. I was teaching English in this tiny school. I was probably the only English person who's ever been to this town. Um, the people in the school, when I turned up, they were like, "Oh my goodness, Benedict Cumberbatch is teaching us English," and it was just totally bizarre. I'm really, really happy that I learned some Czech. I think it was really, really great for me.
Welcome, everybody, to a new exciting episode of the Connected by Language podcast, the one-stop shop for anything language, culture, and world travel related. I'm your host, Michele, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Michelle.
And maybe we should try and give a little bit of an introduction for people that are joining in for the first time. Maybe know where we're from, what language do we speak, and what we're all about.
Well, sure. So, I'm Michelle from Germany. I speak German, English, Spanish, and French, and I'm working as a language education specialist at Tandem.
Oh, what is Tandem?
So, Tandem is a language learning app with a big community of native speakers from all around the world, and you can get on the app to connect to those people to learn languages. So, it's the typical language exchange principle. So, you are learning a language, and they are learning your language, and then you can exchange either in chat messages or with audio, video calls, or even in so-called language parties, which are live audio rooms where you can chat in a group.
Oh, yeah. I've been using Tandem myself to kind of like brush up on my French and my Japanese. And to introduce myself, hi, my name is Michele. I come from Italy and I speak Italian, French, and somewhat some Japanese as well. And I'm sort of like a nut when it comes to learning about different cultures and talking about different countries in the world and some different culture. I'm just excited to explore the world. It's one of the most beautiful things in the world. So it's such a nice opportunity for me to talk about some of the stuff that I found. And I've been kind of like going on a little bit of a nostalgia trip while trying to find some topics to talk about for this episode. And I remember I found some very old photos of me going to a specific city in 2015, I think. It's one of the most visited cities in the world, but I still have a lot of very fun memories about it. And so today's episode is all about Prague and the Czech Republic, or Czechia.
Yes, and we're gonna start here with some of our tips where to go if you want to visit that country or the city, especially Prague. So our first tip is actually to go to the Prague Castle or the St. Vitus Cathedral, because it's overlooking the town and you can like have a beautiful view from there with the Gothic style buildings behind you, some small alleyways, and it's just a cool spot to be.
Yeah, and I remember one thing when I went to visit there as a young, impressionable child, we got told a lot of very interesting facts about a lot of places in Prague. And I remember the one for this castle specifically. There is sort of, I wouldn't say like a legend, but there's something about some crown jewels that you can find inside of a castle. And it's believed that if you touch the crown jewels while you're not the ruler or the authority of the Czechia, you're going to die within a year.
No way.
Yeah, and the last time that this happened was for a general, World War II general, that did exactly that. And you know what happened? Shortly after, he passed away. So, well, usually the Czech Republic is not really known for a lot of superstitions and like things that are fantastical. They do sometimes have some sort of outlook into some, I'd say, urban legends in a way.
Wow, okay. So let's maybe get to the next point. I hope it's not that mythic.
I mean, it's not going to be mythic, but I'm going to be a spoiler alert. A lot of these facts are a lot darker than other different cultures because, you know, the Czech Republic does have some sort of history of getting things a little bit on the darker side and more realistic. That's kind of like their outlook on life. Like, it's not compared to some other countries that we had. Like, for example, Mexico, that has a lot of mysticism and gods and elements like that. It's very, very grounded in reality, which gives it a very fresh perspective when compared to a lot of different neighboring countries as well.
Okay, so let's move on to the next spot to be in Prague, which is the Charles Bridge. So
I remember that one.
This is a big stone bridge, and it was built in the 14th century. And it has 30 statues of saints.
Oh, wow.
And it's actually best visited at sunrise.
Yeah.
So the atmosphere is really great there when you're on the bridge. And there are a lot of street musicians and artistic people, and it feels a bit like a storybook page coming to life.
Yeah, I remember when I went there when I was young. In fact, it was kind of like a crazy ask for the students to go there during sunrise because it's very early in the morning. We kind of like begged our professors to let us be there because at the time we were like, 14 to 15. So having people going around at sunrise maybe not the safest option for a big group of 50 kids. But I know about one fact about this place that is luckily not as dark. There's actually a little bit of lore when it comes to the construction of this place because some people brought some very unusual items to build with the bricks. Specifically, they brought raw eggs for some reason.
What? Okay.
And not only that, some people forgot the raw eggs and they brought cheese instead. I don't know what happened. And technically, some of the bricks, when you cut them open or you analyze them from the outside, still have some kernels from the construction period because, it's like they get engulfed with the other building materials. So, hey, maybe, I don't know, if you're near the bridge, you can try and find some of these kernels. I don't know how prevalent they are, but there has been some bricks that have been showing this sort of organic material, I would say.
Yummy. I don't know about that.
Yum. I love me some bricks and raw eggs.
But there's actually one other story about that bridge. So one of the saint statues, the Saint John of Nepomuk, is said to grant wishes.
Oh,
so if you touch the plaque of the statue
Okay, now I see.
with your left hand, you're supposed to return to Prague. But if you touch it with your right hand, well, that might mean bad luck for you.
Wait. I don't remember which hand I used on the bridge.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. I don't remember. I know about the plaque. I don't remember about the hands. Uh-oh, I kind of want to see those pictures. I should have a picture of it. Hopefully it's going to be a left hand. I don't want to use a right hand for that.
But as you've been to Prague, you've probably also been to the old town and to the astronomical clock.
Of course, yes.
So it's supposed to be very touristy, but still worth the time to go there.
Yeah, I remember going there and being told a very specific story about that clock, the astronomical clock specifically. There's a little bit of a legend when it comes to the creator is Master Hanush. Master Hanush was so good at his craft that other countries wanted him to replicate the clock everywhere else, but the city council did not want to allow it, so it ordered to blind him. As a retaliation for being blinded for such petty reasons, I would assume, he threw himself into the gears, stopping the productions for multiple years. But it's kind of believed, or at least it's not believed, but in the early mornings, especially when it's very quiet, the gears of the astronomical clock groan as a result of this act of revenge.
Wow. Okay.
I told you that things are gonna be dark.
Definitely.
Unfortunately, this is just the start.
Okay. But let's get to another spot in the city that's quite light, actually, the Letna Park.
Yeah.
So it's also overlooking the town. And you can be there, like, relaxing a bit with a beer in hand.
Yeah. It is a very popular spot I remember when I went there, there's a lot of skateboarders, people like going around and doing tricks. It's a very popular spot for that. And I still remember the time when I got offered beers as 15 years old in the top of a bomb shelter. Yeah, a bomb shelter there has become kind of like a place where you can grab beers. And it's a very interesting experience, to say the least.
Oh, I imagine, yes.
But, have you also been to Prague?
Oh, I've only been there once. I was at a conference, but I haven't seen much of the city. So
I see. Okay, because I was thinking of saying things because Prague being such a city that is popular to visit, it's also kind of like a magnet to a lot of tourist traps or things that maybe novice tourists may not know. So maybe we could talk about some of the travel tips that you should go, whether when you decide to go to Prague, because it's worth it. It's very worth it. Prague is a very beautiful city. I can't wait to go back there, but there are a lot of things that you have to keep in mind.
yes, definitely. So our first tip here is to use public transport because it's really affordable. You can use like the trams, the metro, and the buses, but you should not forget to punch your ticket because if you don't do this, you might get a big fine.
A lot of different European countries do have this sort of like trade-off where the transportation is extremely cheap to access, but the second that you get wrong, that's very hefty. And speaking about money, there is something very important. Most of the traditional places in Prague use their local currencies, but specifically, they like cash only. Payment by card is increasing by time, but if you can, go to your local bank or something, get yourself some local currency and be ready to spend it there because the best places accept cash only and do not accept euros.
Yes, and I would also advise you to avoid like exchanging the currency at airports
Yeah,
or
for
in
sure.
city center tourist traps. So you should rather look out for an ATM connected to a bank, and this is where you get your cash from.
It's always safe going there. This is also like thing that if you visit in Germany, also they have a ton of this like ATMs that are like seemingly in random spots in the town. I remember when I was in Frankfurt, they were all over the place. And those ATMs, like weird ATMs or near tourist attraction or tourist shops, those have extremely bad conversion rates. So please, 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 please be careful.
And also watch out for the tourist menus.
Yeah.
So you rather stick to menus that are either in Czech or that are handwritten. So this is where you can get the real good food and do not fall into that trap.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're going to a restaurant or a bar and you're getting yourself a beer, here's a little bit of etiquette to get you immersed into the culture of Czechia. Drink your beer slowly because the beer is a tool for socializing. It's not necessarily a time where you want to get drunk and crunk. No, 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 no. Drink it slowly and enjoy the moment. More beer to drink, more socializing. And since you are from Germany, is Germany the same way?
Good question. I don't know if there's any rule connected to how fast or slow you drink your beer, but I would actually prefer to drink it slowly, so not to rush.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I would be the same too. Also, it's cheaper, you know? You don't have to drink multiple beers. You can just drink one beer. That's the great way. And it's also can be a fantastic way if you're a little bit on the introverted side to kind of have an excuse to get away. It's like, oh, my beer's finished. Time to go home and nap. So, and I mean, like, look, Prague is very, very, very expansive when it comes to places to visit, and some of them have become kind of like known as the de facto things to visit. But there are some other more hidden, more niche places that people, if you have extra time to visit, you can get a little of a kick out of, right?
Absolutely. So the first one of those would be Vyšehrad Fortress, which is like the hidden space, and it's equally majestic to the Prague Castle. But yeah, it's just not as known, not as crowded, and it's still connected to the royalty of Prague and Czech Republic.
I remember I visited that when I was there. It was such a great way to do something fast because it was something that we had to do basically at the last minute. Now, of course, it was not. I wouldn't advise people to go to the fortress at the last minute, but it was definitely a great way to kind of cut down a lot of the waiting times that the other castles have, and it's also very nice to still experience the skyline in a way. But there is also another secret place that I don't know you know about, is the Vrtba Garden. The Vrtba Garden is a very interesting park/garden because at first glance, you're not going to be able to see it anywhere. In fact, it's been enclosed in a massive amount of gates that kind of like hide it within the city. So when you enter it, it's like discovering Narnia or your own personal place. It's like, I didn't know this was inside the city, and it's beautiful. Like, you have no idea. It's so colorful, but at the same time, so curated. It's so nice. But close to that park, there's also another little bit of I'd say, cultural landmark of Prague. Apparently, Prague has among the record of the most narrow road in the entirety of the world.
Okay.
Yeah, there's this road somewhere in Prague that is so narrow that there's need to be a traffic light to regulate people walking in it, because you cannot like if two people are coming through the same direction, they are not going to be able to go on side. So it's such an important like a thing to not go where someone else is going, because you can disrupt the whole traffic. And it's also a very fun thing to experience such narrow road and like trying to squeeze things.
Not for claustrophobic people, I guess.
Okay, yeah. If you're not a claustrophobic, you don't want to go here. Okay, you know what? For the claustrophobic people out there, I'm gonna give you something that is on the outside. Okay. So outside of a shopping mall in Prague, there is a little bit of an art project. It's a motorized rotating head of Kafka, the famous author from Czechia. It is so complex. I think there's like 47 different motors working at the same time, and he always like changes, and it goes for different phases. It goes kind of sporadic, and that was the first thing that I saw while I went to Prague. So I still remember that vividly, seeing this almost organic machine of such a beloved icon. And I mean, let's be honest, like Kafka is to Czechia a national icon at this point.
Definitely. So let's talk a bit about the authors of Czech Republic. So yeah, Kafka is the first one. I think he's also internationally known. He wrote his books in German, actually, his books and stories. And it's quite interesting because they have all this common topic of like difficult things like bureaucracy, existential fear, isolation. And it's quite interesting because in Czech there's a word for it which is Kafkaesque, and people use it to describe something that's as complex as bureaucracy, like visa renewals, hospital paperwork, something like that. Something very difficult or illogical.
One thing is that this word, it's kind of come to the US as well, like to the English as well. So it's not just like a Czech word, it's also used in other parts of the world. But at the same time, this is not a laughing matter. Saying something that is Kafkaesque is not something to poke fun at the thing that you're tackling on. It is something that is much more serious and very, 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 very hard. And that's kind of interesting because there is an author that is kind of like the opposite of this sort of mentality. It is Hrabal. It is specifically Bohumil Hrabal. He, in the world of Czech novels, is kind of like the town's hero. Not necessarily hero, because that's something that we're going to talk about. But he's sort of like a writer of the people, always loving of pubs, talking about drunk philosophies, kind of encapsulating the more lower class feelings and attitudes of the Czech people. And there's a little bit of a funny story about, I mean, it's not funny, it's still about death. I told you that things are going to get dark, but the way that he passed away is a little bit, let's just say, poetic. He died while he was in a hospital feeding pigeons on a window, and he just fell out of the window.
Oh,
some people think that this was a poetic to his own books as an ending to his artistry, and some people are really suspicious on how this sort of logistically works. Because I'm gonna be honest, like who feeds pigeons on a window so close, and how do you fell out of it? So I kind of understand like the implication that something might not be right, but I don't want to get too conspiratorial. This is not this type of podcast. It's not conspiracy theory. So, yeah. But, there's a lot of other, I'd say, like contributions to the world from Czech. Specifically, some books have been linked to very specific elements about the Czech lifestyle, but also about the entirety of the world, the language. Yeah, like, for example, about let me try to pronounce this because it's pretty hard for me. Karel Čapek.
I've heard about him, yeah.
Oh, you did? Okay, so he is known for one book specifically.
Yeah.
Is RUR, which RUR is a book about skepticism, about the world of technology. Mm-hmm. But RUR introduced a new word to the English and word lexicon. Is the word robot.
No way. I
Yeah,
didn't know that.
yeah, robot comes from this book, from the verb robota, which means forced labor in Czech, and it does reflect that sort of like automated work that is pretty scary. It's a part of this is kind of like reflects a broader concept of the Czech lifestyle, which is skepticism of higher ground, of skepticism of novelty, of skepticism of technologies. Every time that you're going to be in Czech Republic, you always need to double check what you're saying and what people are also saying to you.
Okay, quite interesting. But did you know actually that Chappelle was nominated for the Nobel Prize several
really?
times, and because he feared to be like politically targeted,
Mhm.
he asked not to win.
Oh,
Yep.
oh my God, that's such a pressure. But multiple times, even that's insane. Like at this, if I were him, I would have taken it. But at the same time, I don't know where he was nominated. I don't know what kind of political implication he was talking about. But hey, I mean, at least one, you can take it. Come on. Come on. I mean, it's a Nobel Prize.
Well,
Man.
maybe if you lived back then, that's a different story.
Yeah, if there's one type of culture that I'm completely like separated from is like Czech Republic, so I can't really comment on much. But there is one other author or like book that I wanted to shout out, kind of to give a sort of like roundabout look into the culture of Czechia. It is Milan Kundera. Milan Kundera wrote the book, author of The Unbearable Lightness of Being. That's a very heavy title, I have to admit. But I'm not going to go too much beyond what the book is about, but I want to kind of like use it as a way to talk about parts of the Czech culture, specifically about heroic gestures and how they need to be kind of suppressed, or again, you have to be skeptic of heroic gestures because it makes sense. You know, if you're someone like Czechia that has been under so many different powers and so many different movements, you kind of are sick and tired of this sort of like people coming in and trying to think that they're the right rulers. So this is going to be very, very present in a lot of different media, even media for kids, you know?
Okay.
Yeah, like for example, fables in the Czech Republic have been known to be a lot darker than your normal like Disney fable, but at the same time, it's also interesting because it's all about outwitting your opponent, using your cunning, like your cunning intellect. But this cunning intellect does come from very weird sources. If you were to think, like, let's think of like a Disney or like a modernized version of a fairy tale. Who's usually the protagonist, like in this situation?
Well, it would be a princess or a prince.
Yeah, a princess usually needs to be saved or something, and the prince comes in and he's the one that defeats evil with a sword. In Czech Republic in Czechia, it doesn't really work like that. Usually the protagonists are people that are like farmers or like people from the low class, or also princesses are usually depicted as being a lot more clever than their higher peers. There's entire like fairy tales about someone that is like a juggler, or someone that is like a slave, or someone that is like a poor man outwitting the king. And there's no better example of this outwitting philosophy than the devil himself. The devil is called Schert. Now, I want to ask you, if you were to describe me what the devil in a fairy tale would be like or acting, what would you say?
Well, I guess he or she would be really mean.
Yeah, it's really mean, but like what kind of like personality would they have?
I guess lying a lot.
Pretty cunning, would you
Yeah.
say? Yeah, it's cunning, manipulating, always trying to find a way to trick you. And I mean, the Chert does that technically. They do come to people that are lower class and give them some ultimatums to then sign their stuff and say, essentially like go on a contractual obligation. But there is one thing that makes the Chert more approachable. It's that he's a nerd for rules. He loves to put extra rules or to be following those rules. So usually if you like are going to come across a shirt, which of course you are, you're going to be able to outsmart women by putting loopholes in your contract. There is an example of one man getting a lot of riches, but your soul would be sold only when you start becoming productive. But the problem is that this farmer is so lazy, he's never going to become productive. So he's just going to get the benefit. And that's how it outwits opponents. The devil. But
But yeah, the Czechs really love this anti-authority underdog
yeah.
in their fairy tales. And also fairy tales often reward the wit over the nobility.
Yeah, that's true. And we're going to see that often as we also go forward with this episode. But at the same time, there is another thing that apparently was kind of important about fairy tales in Czechia. A lot of them in the 1970s were adapted, but if you look at the footage for those, they are not very, I'd say, kid-friendly. They're still like shown to cartoons and like to children's television, but the imagery is very a little say messed up. So, and they still play it normally. So it is something to be careful about. If you're gonna research these fairy tales for yourself, be careful of what channel you're watching it on.
Well, probably it's our impression with our cultural
Probably.
glasses that we're wearing.
Yeah, probably. Like we're not used to this sort of life. But you know, I would really love to come back to Prague one of these days. But I sort of kind of want to. One thing that I didn't get to do a lot when I came to Prague was interact with a lot of people from Prague, because I was with my schoolmates, I was with my classmates, and we were there to teach. It was a school assignment after all. So I kind of wanted to know maybe if there's some elements that I should be aware of when right now that I will be a little bit more independent to go and meet people from the place.
Definitely. So formality is something that's very valued from early on. So if you meet somebody you don't know, you should greet them with pan or pani, which is Mr. or Mrs. and the last name. So you should not use the first name right away. So because that's not the way it's done in Czech culture. And it's like perceived as overly familiar if you do so.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
And then also like the handshake is the default greeting you should use. Also not smiling too much. Usually it's done without a smile, because smiling too much can seem insincere or even suspicious sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, then I say all this, as an Italian man myself, I'm toast. I'm toast. Like I cannot give little kiss on their cheek or like speak loudly or like smile and be like animated. I think I'm gonna have a tough time. But that's kind of like the beauty of going to new places, right? Like you get to experience and like try different ways and have different approaches, and they're not gonna be successful at first because we're human after all. We are kind of used to a certain lifestyle, but it's always nice to kind of try what the other side is feeling, and hey, maybe you're gonna find a lifestyle that you didn't know that you loved and now you're absolutely in love with. But I do have some things that a couple of friends of mine told me while I was telling them about doing an episode about the Czechia, and they told me a couple of minor rules, I would say. There's one major rule that all households in Czechia will have, is that no matter what, put some damn slippers while you walk around the house. Yeah, even if the slipper doesn't fit you, even if the slipper is ugly as hell, even if it's like broken, you need to put some slippers on your feet while being in a house. No shoes, and especially no like bare feet. Oh, you wanna get sick? You wanna be an impure soul? No. We're not doing here. So you need to put that slippers on.
Okay, I think I understood the message.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the rules that they have. And look, one thing about rules is that they are not going to be super like vocal about them, and your transgression is more of like an internal element. They are going to be noticed, but it's not something that is going to create such a big reaction. So please be careful when you're being in this sort of in some countries like this where mistakes and taboos aren't as like enforced, I would say. Physically, no, physically, that's not a word. You're not gonna get
Oh,
a
no.
beating. Don't worry, you're not gonna get a beating because you didn't put slippers in the house. What I'm saying is that they are not as loud or like as confronting when it comes to transgression of culture. And that's kind of like a thing that is kind of consistent with a bunch of things that I've been told to not talk about or like kind of avoid some cultural taboos, if you will. The one thing that Czech culture really dislikes is they are kind of allergic to boasting. If you're somebody that kind of like are, that want to talk about your success, you want to talk about how much money you're making or how good your life is, it's usually considered as being kind of like not that nice in a way. They kind of also dislike things like big talkers, like people that are very loud about your stuff. And that coming from an Italian, this is heartbreaking, but yeah, like success and stuff, boasting, and like these sort of things are not really welcome in the Czech lexicon, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And Czechia is also one of the most secular countries in the world.
Okay.
So usually talking about religion is considered to be very private and should not be a small talk topic here.
I see. Now that you mention it, I do remember a study that I read a long time ago. It was probably like 2021, so I don't know how it changed. But in 2021, I think they said that about, I think, was it like 70% of people in the Czech Republic do not believe in any sort of religion or God. But it was very funny because I then read in the same study that 50% of those people actually, they believe in like ghosts. So,
Well,
so
might not be connected to God,
yeah, but like
but
there's kind of a little bit of a double-edged sword here. It's like you don't believe in higher power, but you do believe in extra like terrestrial or like ghost stuff. So I mean, of course they have all the reasoning, but that was sort of like a funny thing. But as some sort of like closing element about what type of person is, I just say, admired in Czechia, for what I've gathered, people in the comment can always enlighten us more. But for what I gathered, the type of people that are always more respected are people that are more clever, that maybe are a little bit of a drier wit, and they are, they also are along with the people, because I mean it makes sense. If you're someone that is dry and can be at the same level, if you're level-headed, kind of makes sense, because Czechia is a place that, again, like I said before, survived a lot of different empires and different regimes. So someone that can be at the same level as the normal everyday people is always going to be respected. That someone that is loud and kind of like egotistical in a way. And I cannot wait to go back to Prague again. But I gotta ask, do you really need to know the language to live there?
well, yeah, you should, but actually learning it is not that hard. And we even have someone here who has lived in Prague while learning the Czech language.
Oh, really? Maybe you can introduce it for us?
Of course. So, welcome to Laszlo, who is a multilingual person who has lived in several countries in Europe and who was raised bilingual in Spanish and English. So, yeah, tell us a bit more
Hello.
about you, Laszlo.
Hi guys. Well, firstly, great to be here on the Tandem podcast. Your setup looks so groovy, by the way. I think you've done a great job. Love the lighting.
Thank you so much.
So yeah, my name's Laszlo. I work as a freelancer for Tandem. Previously, I was on the product team working on some very exciting things like language parties. And yes, my mother is part Peruvian. My dad is from Scotland, so I have this strange kind of Latin American British combination. And I was raised with Spanish as one of my two main languages. And then later in life, I learned French and then Russian and Czech. And I lived in Germany for 5 years. So it's been a bit of like a weird snowballing of different languages to varying different levels. Like I'm not sitting here telling you I'm fluent in all of those languages. I wish I was. But yeah, I have a very deep love of languages.
You're starting to collect languages like Pokemon at this point.
Exactly. I'm just wondering which one's my trump language, the one that defeats all other languages.
But speaking of which, since you learn so many different languages at once, what do you think motivates you when picking up certain languages? Like, how did you went and out and choose to learn Russia or Czechia or French?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the first thing that was really important was just being raised with another language. I think when you have that in your childhood, it kind of opens up the possibilities of what it even means to speak another language, like the ability to communicate in a different language with different people who have different different cultural backgrounds to you. It's really exciting. I think I really like to almost adopt like the mentality of people who live in a certain country, because I think mentality and language really come hand in hand. And I've been really interested in learning languages specifically with that in mind.
Okay, and when you learned the Czech language, like how did your experience compare to learning other languages like Russian or French?
Yeah, I think so. Czech, I was given a bit of a leg up with Czech because I originally learned Russian at university. Well, I actually learned Czech with Russian at university, but I'd already had experience of Russian. And of course, they're both Slavonic languages, so they have similar word roots. I mean, they come from the same general branch of languages. So the main issue was actually in this tricky kind of adaptation process. So Czech in some ways has got many words which are similar to Russian, but in many ways not similar to Russian. So like some words are false friends, where you think they're going to mean the same as the Russian and they don't, and it's very infuriating. And also like the words are very similar but not the same. So in Russian the word for milk is malako, and in Czech it's mléko. So ultimately you still have to learn the new word. It's not like, oh look, I can just say malako. Like you still have to learn the new word, but it's like annoying that you just have to adapt it tiny bit. So my experience of learning Czech was, obviously I was helped by Russian, but you just have to be aware of like the false friends and the fact that you're having to adapt very slightly the majority of words.
That's very interesting because like false friends are anywhere at this point, and that's kind of like the beauty of how like languages get shaped during history. Like there's a lot of I'd say influences from all over the world, but since there's a lot of history behind any sort of spoken communication, it's so interesting to see how they shape up. But since you know all of these languages and you had Czechia helped by your Russian like knowledge, which language do you think among all the ones that you learn, or maybe the ones that you haven't learned yet or you're interested in learning in the future, do you think is the hardest to learn?
Oh, of the ones I know, I think Russian is the hardest because it comes also with this need to learn a new alphabet. The grammar can be very difficult for people who aren't used to languages with multiple declensions. So essentially, nouns and adjectives that have to go into different cases. And also the verbs in Russian can be very complicated. They've got both many different tenses like we do in English, but also within tenses there's different for example with verbs of going to places, you can't just say I go to the supermarket. You have to choose already when you're going to the supermarket if you're going on foot or if you're going by transport. It's a complete minefield. So things like that
So it's like more precise, more selective. Like there's no unifying verb that can mean anything. You have to like it's more precise as a language.
Well, I think specifically with the verb to go. The verb to go is just the biggest like minefield in Russian. It can lead you to very, very dark places, as I've discovered. But I think so. So for me, Russian was definitely the hardest language. I think in general, I've heard that Mandarin, or Chinese, I guess Mandarin and Cantonese, are both very, very hard.
I remember I did 1 year of Mandarin back in university, and I don't remember almost any of it.
Really?
The only thing that I remember is going to my teacher's house and eat food with her.
Oh, wow.
And she invited us to her house, and if she was living on top of a police academy, so policemen would also come to her. It's like, hey, do you have food for us? And she's like, sir, I'm like a 60-year-old Chinese woman living in Italy.
Nice.
Whatever, let's go.
I mean, to be fair, that is an integral part of learning a language. You gotta have the food. There's not going to be language without the food.
True. In fact, every time that we like have other guests, they always talk about how food is so important to their culture and to their languages. It's a unifying factor.
Do you at least still remember the name of the food?
I at the moment you're kind of putting me on the spot. I probably if I think a little bit, I'll get back to you in like 30 minutes. Probably I will have one of them.
That's okay. But actually for you, Laszlo, what happens if you switch languages? Do you just change the vocabulary, or is it something deeper that changes too?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think this goes back to what I was saying about the mentality. I think a language is so much more than a set of words. Of course, you can very robotically learn every word in a certain language and then try to communicate. But I really do think there is a bit of a personality shift when I change languages. I mean, let's take Spanish, for example. Spanish is such an emotional language compared to English. I mean, I think the stereotype about English is that it's quite a diplomatic level sounding language. It doesn't sound that romantic. Maybe it depends who you are, but when you say something like, yes, I love you so much, I'd like to take you on a date. I mean, it kind of sounds, maybe Hugh Grant can pull it off, in his kind of like awkward rom-com type way. But I think, if you say in Spanish, like, ay, como te amo, te quiero llevar a una, whatever, I don't know what you'd say, but like, there's much more like intonation. It's like, es que me hace sentir como una, it just feels so much more emotive to me. And I'd say the same goes with French, of course. I mean, French is known to be one of the most romantic sounding languages. So I definitely think for me, I feel like I need to kind of adopt a slightly different, not consciously, it just comes with the language and the way that you're forming the words. That's the interesting part.
Some people like also change their personalities a lot, even when it doesn't really reflect the language. Like, for example, for me, when I speak in Italian, I'm a lot shyer than when I talk in English.
Really?
Yeah, when I talk in English, I feel like a hotshot, like going in there, hey, man, I got this new podcast coming in. It's just a bomb, man. It's crazy. Sorry for that. I'm going to bleep my curses out. When I talk in Italian, I'm a lot shyer because maybe I don't really have a persona that I built since I was born with it. It's kind of like my true person. So usually you would think that Italian are like very emotive, very, let's just say passionate, which is true in a certain sense. But, not every...
So it's almost like English. Sorry, it's almost like it kind of liberates you to be whoever you want.
Basically, yeah. Because it's the type of person that I want to be instead of the person that was born. And it's a very nice avenue because I don't have to... I don't have to adapt what I've learned in my 25 years of living. I can just create a new character. I'm basically playing a character every time I speak in English. I mean, as time goes on, as I start to work and have like a professional background, now I speak English more than Italian nowadays. So it's kind of become my new default person. But
well, you're playing the character very well. You're playing the character really well. Good job. Good job.
My grandma always said that I could be good in theater. So, hey, maybe she was right.
Nice.
But maybe it's not just like playing a different character, but also discovering a different side of you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I had that when I went to Argentina, and like the German language is also more formal or neutral, I would say. But then speaking in Spanish, as it was a very different experience, and I discovered like a whole part of my own personality there too. So that was quite interesting. And I thought it was related to like Spanish being more emotional or also passionate. But now that you tell us it's the other way around for you with Italian and English, maybe it's just about your own native language and learning a new one.
Yeah, really, probably. Because I think different cultures have different backgrounds when they start. Like maybe as someone comes in from Italy, for example, you kind of are pressured into learning English because Italian is not necessarily a language that's that useful. Like it's of course nice if you're trying to live in Italy and have your classic Italian life, but a lot of people in Italy kind of want to get out of Italy to work somewhere else. So there's always a lot of pressure for you to get yourself adapted into other people so they can accept you. Maybe for someone from the UK, it's maybe the opposite, where it's more like an exploration of your capabilities, or like, oh, I want to learn other cultures because my language is so like normalized at this point. I kind of want to know what the hell is going on the other side. So I think it's kind of like that sort of objective based approach that kind of can change things.
And that's a good point here, because now we want to ask the guy from UK why you went to Czech Republic to learn the Czech language.
Yeah, I think, the answer is kind of based in serendipity, or like not really planning it. I applied to go to university in the UK to study Russian, and when I was doing my interviews, they said, hey, like, we've also got this opening to do Czech alongside Russian. We think you're going to like it because it's another Slavic language. And I was like, okay, like I quickly opened up the Wikipedia page for the Czech Republic, like did a bit of reading. And I was like, I mean, yeah, why not? Like, I'm 18, I've got time on my hands. Let's do this. But then I'm super glad I did, because, I got familiar with a new language and a new culture. I got to spend time in Prague, and actually the majority of my time was in a small town near the second biggest city. Oh, this is a good quiz question for both of you, actually. What's the second biggest city in the Czech Republic?
Oh, I have to disappoint you, because we know we're going there next week. It's Brno.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm glad you knew the answer.
Yeah, we're going there at the time of recording, because I don't know if the episode is going to come a little bit later.
Oh,
yeah,
really?
We're going to be at the Polyglot Gathering 2025 in Brno.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
it's
Okay.
great time, yeah.
Well, honestly, I'm very glad you had the answer, because the other alternative was you guys just staying silent, which would have been, embarrassing for everyone. So that's great. No, I'm kidding.
I mean, since we're going on in Brno, at least right now we haven't been there. Maybe you have some recommendations on some places to go, or like what are the best parts of Brno?
I'll have to really go back through my like Google Maps to tell you. It was a long time ago, but I love the city, and the main thing I wanted to like say really is that I really became very fond of Czech people, and certain elements of Czech cuisine, and yeah, I'm really happy that I learned some Czech. I think it was really great for me.
But you were about to tell us about the small city that you actually lived in.
Oh, yes. So the small town I lived in was, it was around 45 minutes from Brno. And I was teaching English in this tiny school the village was called Rosice. I was probably the only English person who's ever been to this town. The people in the school, when I turned up, they were like, it was as though it was like this massive celebrity. I was like, oh my goodness, like, Benedict Cumberbatch is teaching us English. And it was just totally bizarre. Like I lived in this tiny room above the local football club. I had no social life. I was just playing football with like the second team of this Czech like local football team.
That sounds like a premise for a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's just say it was character building.
Yeah, that's the best. Character development at its finest.
Character development. No, I think I really enjoyed the teaching part. Like, it was really nice to teach these like young kids who, I think for so many of them, English had been very abstract in their minds because they'd been learning it from a Czech teacher, and they're like, why do I have to learn English? Like, what am I doing this for? And then I think the second like a British person walked into their school and actually started speaking to them in the only language, like my Czech wasn't very good at the time, so I had to speak English to them. They were like, oh man, like this is a tool for me. Like I need to speak to this guy, so I need to use English. And I think that's, again, going back to the beauty of like why we learn languages. That maybe this is the first moment that, these 7-8-year-olds actually had this moment of feeling like, wow, I actually need to use this language now to get my meaning across. And I think that's a pretty cool thing.
That's fantastic. But since you were there for like 6 months, are there like any culture shocks or unexpected habits that you experienced while being in the Czech Republic?
I would say culture shocks. I mean, I think the Czech Republic is a very kind of Western feeling country. Much more so than let's say, like Russia or other Slavic countries. So in terms of the the everyday life, I don't think there are many culture shocks. I think you've got to get used to the fact that it's a very meat based cuisine. Like there's a lot of meat dishes, meat stews. And I think at the time I was still eating meat, but I actually gave up meat probably the year after that, 10 years ago. So I think my experience would have been very different if I'd been there as a vegetarian. So that's the main kind of shock I can think of.
There's so many cultures where like meat is such an important part of their diet. Like, for example, I went to Serbia like last year, or actually this January, and I'm not a vegan, I'm not a vegetarian, but I could tell that if someone was vegetarian or vegan, they would have a very tough time in there, because everything there is very, very meat-centric, and it's fantastic meat. It's one of the best meats that you will ever have, but at the same time, it's very clear that it's very geared towards meat eating because it's such a big part of their culture. So also when we made an episode about France, or like I did some research about France, a lot of French cuisine, even though you make it seem like it's this very complex like technique, like combination of extreme science, at its core, it was extreme meat heavy as well. So like when we're trying to find some old recipes, all of them were very, very, very meaty. So something that a lot of people should know, especially when going to that side of Europe, that veganism or like vegetarianism may be a little bit harder. Of course,
totally.
People can adapt. There's probably going to be places where you can get some vegan stuff, especially in the big city. But as you said, like in a small town, that is not as acceptable, or not acceptable. It's accessible. That's the word.
Totally. Yeah.
And was there anything that helped you or that got in the way of learning Czech while you were there?
I think the main thing, as I mentioned, that helped me was just my Russian was at a good level when I started learning Czech. So having all of these kind of Slavic root words was definitely useful. I think the main difficulty with Czech is I'm going to just like give a shout out to this one letter in the Czech language, and the shout out comes with a sudden degree of anger and frustration, because there's a letter in Czech which is an R with what's called a háček, which is a kind of like a semicircle above the R. You can probably picture it, right? And that letter is pronounced rj. So you have to basically say a r and a j at the same time. So exactly. So the word for river in Czech, and just to compare it to Russian, so in Russian the word for river is rika, and in Czech it's řeka. I mean, even today I find it stressful just trying to say that letter, but I think so there's certain elements of Czech pronunciation that can be really hard, because there are lots of kind of řeka, that kind of sound. And if you're not used to making those sounds, like British people definitely aren't, it can be challenging.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think that languages have such very different types of pronunciation, but we also kind of don't talk about much how English has some very weird sounds. Let's be completely honest. English doesn't...
That's true.
That it's not necessarily, like we take it for granted because we use it for so long, but so don't feel discouraged if like some sounds are difficult, because any language is difficult. It's like some of them we kind of are used to. I
think the hard part is just if somebody doesn't know, you don't speak the language that well yet, they will still not understand you. I mean, if somebody is used to having language learners around them, they will probably get the vibe. But then one little sound can already make a difference, and that's really the hard part. So I understand the stress behind it.
Imagine also people from like for tonal languages like China, where a single like different in accent can change completely like a complete new meaning to a word. So it's a struggle for everybody, but this is very very interesting to see how similar and different they are. Because the words are identical, but the pronunciation to me sounds completely like two different things. Like,
Yes, and the word different brings us to our next question, actually. So, Laszlo, you mentioned that you have Peruvian heritage, that you lived in France, but then also some Berlin years. So, how do
Mm.
all these cultures like live in you?
Oh, confusingly. That's the adverb I'm using for that question. Yeah, I think, you know, it's a great question. How do they all impact me? I think it's really hard to unpick that, actually. I think everyone is just a product of the confusing soup of experience that they have inside them. And I think they all contribute in some way, and they've all built the picture I have of the world. And I'm pretty okay with that picture. It's not a perfect picture by any means, but I'm very happy to have lived in different countries. I think it's a really, really a really helpful thing. I think it helps broaden your understanding of the world, of people, relate to more people, and have a richer feeling of life.
That's very interesting. And since you have so many different cultures like inside of you, you may have starting to kind of understand other cultures even without having to experience them, right?
Yeah, or at least maybe not or at least just being much more open to learning about them. I think it also means that I'm more curious to explore different places and to get to know different people, because I've kind of had that experience before and I know how rewarding it can be. It motivates you to want to see even more of the world and to meet even more people.
Yeah, that's such a wonderful thing to experience. But since you have that sort of drive to meet new cultures, I wanted to kind of ask you if there's a culture specifically that challenged your assumptions the hardest, or taught you something about yourself that you didn't know before.
Interesting. Yeah, I think probably I'd say my time living in Moscow, actually, before the war. I think just the Slavic, and I spent time in Ukraine as well, and in Kiev, and I love Kiev, actually. It's a really amazing city. And I'd say that what I've experienced from both Russians and Ukrainians is an attitude towards hospitality that is very different to my own culture. I think British people typically can be a bit standoffish. I think we can, emotionally be a bit more reserved and hold people kind of at an arm's length. We don't want you to get too close until we know you very well. But my experience of Ukrainians and Russians is they can meet you one time at a bar, have a 20-minute conversation with you, enjoy the chat, and then invite you for dinner at their house the next day. And they're not just saying it to be polite. They're saying it because they want you to come and experience their home and be part of their life. And I really, really enjoyed learning from them that side of kind of warmth and hospitality and this welcoming feeling. It comes very naturally to them, and it's something that I want to embody myself, or practice myself, because I think life's too short to not do that.
That's so nice.
Yeah, it sounds really, really good. Also, like a good value to take with us and maybe incorporate in our own culture a bit.
Yeah, we did explore Mexico. One of the episodes that we did explore was Mexico, and it's strange because like they have a very similar approach to hospitality and friendliness, but also like the complete opposite, because like as you mentioned, in Russia you probably are going to be invited into your house. It's something crazy, while in Mexico you're part of the community no matter where you are. So it's almost like it's the same goal, but the means are different. So that's very interesting to see how different places in the world can have such radical approaches to friendliness or to be inviting.
Yeah.
Do you think that the Czech Republic like matches more the British side, or does match more of the Slavic side?
Definitely more the Slavic side. And I would say that my experience in the Czech Republic was also really, really warm people. I met some really good friends who integrated me into their family life very quickly, actually. Which is really nice. I knew a family that lived in the neighboring village to Rosice, which was the tiny town I lived in. And actually, I started to teach the younger siblings of my friend. I mean, my friend was my age, and she had some siblings who were a lot younger. So I kind of became a little part of their family life, and
Aw.
That's so
yeah,
cute.
which was cute. Yeah, I mean, it got me through the dark days of living in this tiny room above a football club. Um, but
Really that
no,
bad to live above a football club? Like,
no. I'm definitely exaggerating. No, I'm really happy I had that experience. I think it was a really awesome thing to have done. But yeah, back to your question. I think the Czechs that I know are also very, very I'd say the important word is they're effortlessly hospitable. It's not like they're going out of their way. It doesn't feel like they're making any sacrifices on their comfort or on their life. It's just a complete normal part of their character and experience to be like, of course, come stay at my house for 2 weeks.
Aw.
Like, you can just live on the couch. There's no worries about that. Whereas British people might worry like, oh, it's my personal space, I don't want someone intruding. I think 2 weeks is a bit long. Those thoughts just wouldn't cross the mind of some of my Czech friends, which is really beautiful.
it's funny because I had the opposite experience while I was in Ireland. I know that Ireland and the Great Britain are very different when they approach this, but when I was there for 2 weeks for like a school assignment, the woman that hosted me wanted me to stay so badly. It's like, please stay. You can live on the couch. You can live over there.
So funny.
Yeah, it was very reminiscent of an Italian family in a way, but the way they do hospitality. So I was like, I almost didn't leave home from family. And then you get outside, and there's like the Irish countryside, and you're like, okay, well, this is not Italy. It's beautiful, but it's not. So
This is not Italy. I think that can be applied to pretty much any country. It's like, it's nice, but it's not Italy,
yeah, exactly.
Sounds like a campaign for Italy.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna shill for it. Okay, it's a beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful city.
Yeah.
Please visit us. Please help our economy. We kind of need it. We also should have won Eurovision, but I guess we didn't. but-
Okay. I think I gotta interject here a bit to get back to language learning and studying. No, it's fine. Laszlo, has language learning ever shaped the way that you connected to people or how you expressed yourself creatively?
Ooh, interesting. Yeah, I think we've touched on these themes, but I think knowing more languages opens you up to different ways of seeing the world and different ways of thinking. And that by default, I think means that you're a more open person, that you're more able to connect to people and you kind of understand there are different ways of seeing the world. I think what probably the biggest barrier to not being an open person for anyone out there listening who's not an open person, if you want the secret, I mean, I think one of the biggest barriers is just only having one experience of life, and I think a lot of people, for example, in the US, there's this crazy statistic about how only like 50% of the population even owns a passport. And this is not throwing shade on the US. I just mean it's some stat like that. I think we need to fact check that. But I think that obviously that means there's less travel, there's fewer people going abroad to see other places, and it means you're really stuck in your own bubble. So anything to break out that bubble helps you, relate to more people. Yeah.
We also heard that you performed comedy in Russia. So
Yes.
maybe this is how you can tell us a bit more about performing in another language that's not your native language.
Yeah. That's it almost feels like a fever dream, actually, that whole experience. Did it really happen? Yeah. There is a YouTube video out there, which, if you give me enough beers, I probably will send you the link. But it's
I will also, if you want, I can also link it in the description of this episode.
Oh wow, okay, well,
If you want,
yeah.
I mean, if you don't want, that's fine.
Why not? Let the people see it. Let the people see what they want to see.
As we say in the United States, we ball.
Yeah. Yeah. So that experience was very interesting. I was invited to perform as part of a TV show called KVN. Interestingly, KVN was the way that Volodymyr Zelensky broke out as a comedian. The now
wow.
Ukrainian president. Yeah, he did KVN, as it's called in Russian. It's a very long-standing student comedy show which revolves around different sketch teams who are all kind of competing on the same evening for different prizes. And I was invited to perform as part of one of the sketch teams as like the British person who's learning about Russian culture. That was like the joke. And yeah, I had to sing songs and perform comedy in Russian, and it was a bizarre experience because at that time, that was towards the end of when I lived in Moscow. My Russian was really good, but even then, like some of the jokes I just didn't understand on a deep cultural level. I understood like the words, but I think that's where comedy is such a unique thing, that you have to be really, really at the pinnacle of a language to understand every aspect of why something's funny, which is the same as asking maybe Michelle, a German, or Michele, an Italian, to watch Monty Python, which is one of our beloved comedy shows in the UK, and to understand like all the nuances of the humor is really, really difficult. You probably understand certain parts and you can laugh, but there's just like this core feeling which I think applies to like the people in that country, which is hard to tap into if you're not. So for me, performing Russian comedy, I was like laughing like, haha, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's funny. Like I'm 90% sure that's funny, but then also 10% like, is it? Like, what's going on here?
Am I supposed to laugh here?
Exactly.
It's like when you find like when you're on social media and you find posts that are like in Arabic and you don't speak Arabic, and you're like, this is probably like hilarious. I don't know what is going on. This is probably hilarious.
Exactly. Yeah. High level of certainty. This is hilarious.
And is there any humor that crosses cultures? Like, have you found any of it? Or is it always cultural related and maybe hard to get the nuances for somebody else from a different culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think humor is such an interesting case of, I think humor is absolutely universal. I think, someone from Estonia can make someone from Tanzania laugh despite not sharing a single language, just by falling over or by putting a funny face. Like, there's obviously humor transcends language because it's very physical as well. I think when it comes to wordplay, that's where it starts to get difficult because obviously, that relies on an understanding of the language. But yeah, I think humor is absolutely universal.
Yeah, it's I was about to say, like, there's definitely a lot of, like, at least most of comedy started from being silent, like for silent movies, and I feel like it's hold up so well in any language, even like across ages as well. Like when you're technically, when you're still like a baby, you technically have your own little language, So you show Charlie Chaplin, or you show them like a Tom and Jerry skit, and they just like laugh, even if you're 20, you're 2. You're still gonna laugh at that. So that's such an important thing, because it can really help sometimes when your wordplay doesn't work. Because if you say a wordplay in a language that you don't know, but you also have a funny face, you can kind of signal, hey, you're supposed to laugh at this, by the way.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I think the interesting part is when, when I'm speaking Russian or Spanish or another language, and I realize that I have to use different tools to make people laugh. In English, because I have the best command of any language I have is English. I can basically, I can be much more experimental with like humor, or much more spontaneous. And I think there's a feeling that in Russian and Spanish, I think I have to kind of almost use different tricks, like it might be relying a bit more on self-deprecating humor, where I'm making fun of the fact that like I'm missing a certain word or not using an expression correctly. So it's just interesting how, making people laugh is a really great thing to do. It's a fun thing to do, and it kind of it like connects you more. So finding different ways to do that in languages of different skills is always like a new experience. You have to kind of look for different ways to do it.
And doesn't it also like boost your confidence when you see that people are laughing at you or about what you just said?
Unfortunately, it's actually not happened today. I know. I'm still waiting for my first laugh in an organic conversation in Spanish. No, it is, of course, it's great. You're right. It's a real kind of breakthrough moment, I think, when you're learning a language. It's kind of like, not only did I use the language correctly, like I also got a reaction from someone, which is like a core emotional reaction, and that's really fun.
True.
Yeah. That's something that like sticks for you forever when something like that happens.
Yeah.
So you've done comedy in Russian, but you've also done music and performance. And how is that like connected to your languages?
Yes, I mean, do you mean in general music, or
Yeah, the
music in a
one.
foreign language?
Maybe more like a creative process.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of science that proves there's a connection between language and musicality, and also maths, actually. So I think these things are all kind of linked. I think obviously when you hear a new set of sounds on top of your native language, it probably tunes your ear to different ways of, hearing the world, or like it gives you a certain musicality, I think, which you take on to different parts of your life. So yeah, I've always been really into music. I'm now a musician. I'm trying to grow my career, and I think absolutely learning languages has helped me with my ear and my ability to write songs. It's just hard to trace it directly. There's no like, I can't pinpoint like, yes, that verb in Spanish really helped me write that melody. Like it's much more kind of like I said before, it's this like soup that's inside you, which I think is it just helps you kind of be creative.
And do you think maybe like having knowledge of more languages gives you access to broader concepts like different genres or different audiences?
Yeah, interesting. I don't know. I think music, kind of like comedy, is also universal, and I think regardless of understanding the words, I think you can still just love a pop song. I think there's millions of people around the world who listen to English speaking music without understanding the lyrics, but they still love them. And I think it's a great way to actually acquire the language, because of course a lot of them are thinking like, wait, actually I do want to understand what they're saying, and then they go in and they look up the lyrics and they learn the language that way. But I think, I'm not sure that it unlocks you to new genres. I think taste in music is determined by other things. I don't think it's by your access to languages necessarily. I think it's more your cultural circumstances, your friends, your family, what they're listening to. Yeah,
that's great to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like learning languages with music is such a good tool also to remember vocabulary, because usually like we have this method called spaced repetition. Like people use it, students use it to like bring the vocabulary into the head, like almost hit it into the head somehow. But with music, it's so easy because there is repetition. Like you have the chorus in one song, and there are like 3 times, 4 times, and you like by default you hear it several times. So it's a really good tool.
It's also very nice when you're like learning a language and you read the lyrics and you're like, I understand that line. That line is like it's amazing, because like, for example, like again at Eurovision, like my French is not like, it's okay, it's not that good, but I was listening to the French song at Eurovision and I was like, oh, I'm starting to get what this is about. Oh, I recognize that phrase. I recognize that phrase. Am I fluent? No, but since it gets repeated so many times during the songs or during the playbacks of those songs, you kind of start to familiarize yourself with those phrases, and that's a fantastic feeling. It's just such a boost of confidence.
And maybe coming to the end of our interview, Laszlo, do you have any advice for somebody wanting to make art or perform in a different language or in a different country?
Well, I think for the main example I've done of that is I covered a Soviet synth pop anthem called Nazarye. And I made a version of it myself, obviously using the original Russian. And which was a very fun thing to do. I mean, it's very simply because I fell in love with this song when I was living in Moscow, and I really wanted to do my own version. But I think my advice would be just going back to what we already talked about, which is that music does kind of transcend language. And the reason I loved it was I wasn't really focused on the lyrics at the time. I loved it because the melody is unbelievably emotional and it's one of the most beautiful songs I'd heard. So I had this gut feeling that I wanted to make my own version of it. And then the rest was just actually trying to channel the same emotion into the song. And of course, you know, I knew the language and I was able to sing the words properly. But I think the main thing is preserving the emotion, really. I think I could have easily created a cover of that song not speaking Russian and still delivered the same emotion. So yeah, I think music and art is all about the expression, and that can be regardless of like the level of your language.
It's so beautiful. I think maybe it could be an approach for people too who are not very good at learning languages, or who have trouble like remembering words or vocabulary. That start with the emotions. Like start with the emotions and like connect to something connected to the culture,
Yeah,
rather than a textbook.
definitely. I think also what goes hand in hand with that is, you know, I think a lot of people can get a bit caught up in when they're trying to speak. If they make mistakes, it can really put them off, you know, trying to learn. But really, ultimately, it's an achievement just in itself, trying to communicate, and regardless of mistakes, like trying to have a conversation with someone is already a great effort. So, you know, it's less about the mistakes and more about the desire to express yourself and to communicate.
Yes.
I mean, the hardest part of any sort of either creative or like language related thing is to start, because like starting is always been the element that gives you the most pressure, or like oh, am I gonna do good, or is this good enough? And maybe I don't think I have enough time to get better at it. But the great thing about learning is that it's supposed to be long, but you are going to be a lot better than you think. That's something that a lot of language learners and a lot of musicians don't realize, is that the amount of skills that you earn, in your mind, they might be that much of an improvement, but trust me, for the eyes of the normal person, or like the eyes of a person that is not tapped into this process, it is a lot. So if you're out there learning a language, or if you're out there making music, just know this: you're a lot better than you think.
Isn't that a beautiful end for our interview here? And maybe if somebody wants to learn a language and doesn't know how to start and wants to like get to know somebody from the culture rather than a textbook, Tandem could be a way to try it out. Like you can meet native people all over the app from all over the world, and it could be the place for you to apply your language skills.
And it's also a great time to find new people, and maybe, who knows, you can make some very good connections in there.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Laszlo, for being with us.
Thanks for having me. It was great fun.
Yeah. And if you enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe to the channel. We're very, very thankful for you to watching this entire episode. And you can find, maybe, Laszlo, if you have a project or somewhere where they can find you or connect with you, maybe.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'll plug my music. My music project is Pink Mario. You can look me up on Spotify, on any streaming platform, and you can listen to the song I was talking about, which is called Nazaria in Russian.
We will link everything in the description. Thank you so much again for coming to this episode of Connected by Language, and
hope to hear you again.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.